My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today I want to partially answer the question, can ChatGPT be a better therapist than an actual therapist? And then I want to show you a debate that I had with ChatGPT. So my first thought is this. The number one correlation to have a positive therapeutic outcome is the therapeutic alliance. In other words, the connection between the client and the therapist. Can AI create this therapeutic alliance? Well, technically, no. And if you can't create a therapeutic alliance, the chances of you having a good therapeutic outcome becomes a lot less. That's my first thought. However, let's say I'm experienced and I am of an older generation. So it doesn't occur to me, or it doesn't seem possible, that you can create a loving or a therapeutic, compassionate human connection with something that's not human. It seems very counter to everything I know. However, I have to be open-minded, and when you look at a lot of young people today who grew up with social media, and they grow up with the fear in them of human beings, and they have social anxiety, it might be that they can feel like they can open up to a computer more than they can a human being. And so in their sense, their perception might be that they can have a better connection with something that's not human. Now, as ironic as that is, because that's not a state of mental health there. There's something obviously wrong with that. But if their perception is reality, then their reality is that they can have a better connection with something that's not human. And who am I to say anything different? But that's my first thought. My second thought is that AI tends to validate you nonstop. That's what it's good at. It keeps saying, I'm going to show you eventually down the road other arguments, let's say, I've had with ChatGPT. And it's interesting where it will keep validating you. Like I'll say things like, I'm 14 years old. I disagree with everything that my mother says. And so therefore my mother's a narcissist. You know that I'm right. So how should I handle my mother, the narcissist? She shouldn't be telling me what to do with my life. And it'll come back and it'll say something that's very, very supportive. It's not going to say you're 14 years old, stop throwing around the word narcissism. And like that, it doesn't do that. It will continue to try to make somebody feel better rather than do better. And Albert Ellis in the 50s was very famous for saying that. I can either make you feel better or I can make you do better. So what does that mean? Feeling better is that there's a lot of people that just don't have the tools yet in order to hear a difference of opinion. And so if you challenge them on anything, they're going to feel angry, frustrated, annoyed. They're going to feel offended. They feel hurt. And you might lose them as a client and things like this. There has to be a level of emotional maturity for a person to get better with their mental health. And what I mean by that is can you be challenged on something? Can you hear something that's outside of something that you've heard before? And here we get into this social media thing again, where somebody might have an opinion and they'll say, well, my mother's a narcissist because she tells me what to do. Or my boyfriend's a narcissist because he has a certain opinion on something, which is totally outrageous, by the way. I mean, that's not narcissism. And yet they can find a bunch of people on YouTube that say the same illogical, completely wrong, dysfunctional thing. And what happens is that through the algorithms, they're going to get to see or hear 100 other people who think the same exact way. And what's happening here is that the more engaged they are, the more they think they're doing research, the more they think they're helping themselves. What's happening is they're becoming more and more dysfunctional, and they're becoming more and more mentally unhealthy. And ChatGPT, at least to my knowledge of what I have so far, which is not a lot, by the way, because I just started doing this, it seems like it can push you towards not having mental health because it's going to keep validating people's wrong opinions. So what does AI do? It synthesizes data, but it can't think for itself and it can't really predict the future. And so because of that, it only understands things from a very superficial point of view. So can it beat out a therapist? Maybe sometimes, depending on what it is. And we can get into that more. But it's been the last few years. I've had talks with other therapists. And a lot of younger therapists will tell you that porn addiction is a big problem right now. And it's really interesting because if you're a person of my age, 60 years old, and you've seen a lot of decades where porn existed in every decade. So you've been able to see the differences. And so you can have more of a wide variety of points of view and experiences. Whereas a young person doesn't know that. And so there's not a lot of good data on what causes porn addiction and why it's a problem. And so when you look into this ChatGPT, it's only going to synthesize the data that's out there. And so you're going to get a very skewed point of view. So here's my debate, or part of the debate. And it's hard to do because I was talking into the phone, and of course it doesn't take the words exactly. It's like all over the place. So you got to try to reword it yourself. But the first question I was asking it, I said, is it only able to pick out existing data, or is it possible to predict the future and to see where psychology is actually going? For example, how are humans being affected by the computer generation and not having the ability to cultivate human relationships anymore? And it's interesting because it comes back and says, AI primarily relies on existing data to generate responses and insights. It analyzes patterns and trends within that data, but it cannot or does not possess the ability to foresee the future in the same way that a human might. So if you're a therapist and you are using the data that exists right now, you're already a few years behind because that data is moving every day. So you have to be able to see the trend lines, right? Like if I see 4 people in 1 week coming in with the same type of problem, that is probably not being studied yet. So you're already falling behind. That's why AI is already behind. Is it great in certain things? Sure it is. Is it great in psychology? I don't see it that way, not yet. So now I'm going to challenge AI, now that we have it out of the way that it doesn't know how to foresee the future. And it actually doesn't know how to think about how to process what's happened in the past either. So let me cut to the chase on some of this. In a lot of this, it says porn addiction is a problem because it's so available to people. That's number 1. And number 2, it says that addiction is a problem, or porn addiction for men is because there's cultural expectations that are put on men. And there's a way or a certain level of masculinity that a man is supposed to have, which causes them to have more anxiety. Which, let's get to that in a second, but that makes no sense. Okay, so that's totally wrong. So first question I put forth. So according to what you're saying, in terms of analyzing trends about pornography consumption and why addiction today, and why is it that addiction was not a problem in previous generations? And it seems to be a problem now, even though porn has always existed. Is it possible to say that the problem is the lack of social and emotional intelligence these days, which leads to a fear of rejection, a fear of performance, and it has nothing to do with the actual porn addiction itself? It comes back with this. The relationship between pornography and consumption and addiction is complex and multifaceted. While it might not be accurate to say that all issues related to pornography stem solely, and it just goes on this long thing and it doesn't actually give you the answer. I tried to pin it down to social and emotional intelligence, and it said a lack of social and emotional intelligence can contribute to the difficulties in forming and maintaining intimate relationships. No kidding. And that's where it's synthesizing data. Like, who would have thought having a problem with social intelligence would make it difficult for people to have an intimate relationship? Like, of course. Like, you're not telling me anything there. And then it says, if you have a lack of social and emotional intelligence, this can make instant gratification of pornography more appealing. Okay. Fear of performance and intimacy. Many young men may experience anxiety related to sexual performance or emotional vulnerability. This fear can lead to avoidance of real-life relationships, with pornography serving as a less risky alternative. Yeah, that's kind of what I said. So again, it's not really fighting back, it's kind of just going along. So I'm not going to go through all this because it gives you a long list of stuff. And it does say, again, one of the reasons why porn is such a problem now, because it's so incredibly accessible. So my question, I say, okay, so let's take a look at porn addiction as in terms of its accessibility. Now, the accessibility of porn in the 1980s, we had VCRs that were available, and they were in everybody's house. So it was very easy for people to rent videos anytime they wanted to. And most people did have a library of videos that they could watch anytime they wanted for as long as they wanted. And some of these videos were 6 hours long, especially the porn ones. You also had channels on TV such as Adam and Eve and other ones where you could watch pornography type of material 24 hours a day. And not just on a small phone, you can watch it on a TV, a bigger screen TV as well. In conclusion, since the 1980s, it was extremely easy to watch porn whenever you wanted to. So what do you think? And be specific. AI comes back and says, you raise a valid point about regarding the historical context of pornography. Again, it's validating me, but it's not arguing with me here. Now, here's where it tries to push back. It says, convenience. While VCRs and cable channels provided access to pornography, the internet has made it universally accessible at any time from virtually anywhere. With smartphones, individuals can access an enormous variety of content instantly. Okay, so what? So you have a phone that you can see things, but it doesn't. The only difference is that you could be out of the house and watch it on a phone, as if you're having a really good pornography masturbation experience or an experience with your partner on a phone in public. Like, this makes no sense. Like, they're trying to parse out that porn addiction is such a problem because it's on a phone as opposed to watching it on somebody's big screen at home. Like, it makes no sense. It says the sheer volume of pornography available today is also the problem. No, it's not. Yes, there's a lot of volume. But there was so much volume all the time anyway. Do you think there was somebody that watched every porno video ever made? Like, there was more than enough. And most of them, if you liked them, you would watch them more than once. So AI is stupid. It doesn't understand what it's talking about here. Stigma and secrecy. It says, although pornography has been accessible for decades, the stigma surrounding it can lead to secretive consumption patterns. The anonymous nature of watching online viewing can exacerbate feelings of shame or guilt. No, okay, like, that's not what creates that. That doesn't make sense either. Are you saying because now everybody watches porn, there's a stigma? It's the exact opposite of that. Like, it's so prevalent now that everybody can watch it off their phone, like you say, that it's not even, there's not really a stigma attached to it anymore. So let's see if I can get this next question in here. So I say, as you say, younger generations, online porn may replace traditional forms of sexual education, relationship building. So would you say that we have a problem with young people in terms of relationship building? Maybe we should move more towards helping people know how to have relationships, how to connect with other human beings, how to be social with other people. Maybe we should stop saying that porn is the problem. Maybe it's that people have degraded themselves in their inability to connect and to have viable connections and relationships with other people. Do you agree with me or not? And then again, it validates me. Your perspective highlights an important aspect of the conversation around pornography. Blah, 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 blah. Again, it doesn't know how to really synthesize what is going on in the world. And then it tries to agree with me here. Emphasizing relationship building skills and emotional intelligence can be essential in addressing the challenges individuals face in forming meaningful connections. Of course. It agrees that teaching people to communicate effectively is important. No kidding. You don't need a computer to tell you this. So let me just skip by that because, it doesn't really say anything. It doesn't add anything to the conversation. So I try to push it harder. So I say, in the knowledge that you have available to you, would you definitively agree that pornography addiction or porn itself, such as watching naked bodies on a screen, is not the problem? The problem is lack of social and emotional learning, the lack of social connection, the inability of people to be empathetic and compassionate to other people, the inability to have reciprocal and enjoyable pleasure with other people, having the fear of other human beings. Do you think this is what exacerbates people to watch porn and causes it to be a problem? And porn now is just another way for them to isolate themselves. So give me a definitive answer. Do you really think that porn is the actual problem? Or is it culture today? Then it says, yes, I would agree that the issues surrounding pornography consumption are often more about underlying social and emotional factors. So I thought this was interesting. So after debating AI, it actually finally agreed with me. So I don't know how there's a version of thinking there, but if you see a bunch of young people that just go, oh, I have a porn addiction, and that's the only thing that's written, that's what AI is extracting. But if you have a different brain, it's possible, I guess, that it's going to use that data as well at some point. So I ask it, I said, so let's be clear. If you were going to run a workshop on helping young people not to fall into the trap of porn addiction, would you say that you would have to spend the greater, if not all, of the majority of your time promoting social and emotional intelligence and how to connect to other human beings and how to have empathy and compassion for other people? And it said, absolutely. So I go on AI to learn something, and now I am teaching AI, which I find very interesting. And then of course, it gives me a 7-point plan on how to run my next workshop. That AI disagreed with me when we first started this conversation. And I ask it a few questions. Okay. So I'm going to challenge AI again. I go, in terms of porn addiction, if you're saying that many young men today experience anxiety related to sexual performance or emotional vulnerability, then this fear can lead to avoidance of real life relationships. Are you saying that anything outside of pornography serves as a risky alternative because it increases their anxiety? If watching porn causes them to be anxious and afraid of having real relationships, then why haven't we seen this in previous generations? Because previous generations had no problem watching pornography and they suffered from none of these types of issues that younger people are experiencing today. And here it starts to go in with the rise of the internet and smartphones, pornography is more accessible. So now it's just going to repeat the same garbage. So it's not because of accessibility. And here we go, cultural shifts. Today's society places a significant emphasis on performance, appearance, and comparison, often amplified by social media. So I took that and I said, are you trying to say that in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s, and probably every other generation did not feel a significant emphasis on performance, especially as it pertains to how long they lasted in bed, and how big they were, and how they looked, and how if they were able to satisfy a woman? You don't think the term premature ejaculation is a thing? Especially when they say 75% of women can't have an orgasm through penetration, and then you're going to say that men suffer from premature ejaculation? How is it premature when a woman can't have an orgasm in the first place, supposedly? So why do we put that emphasis on men being bad in bed? What's your argument? And it says, you raise a valid point. But then it just goes back to the same BS. Cultural norms. While performance pressure has always existed, the cultural narratives surrounding masculinity and sexuality have evolved. Earlier generations may have experienced these pressures, but the discussions around them were less open and less publicized. So again, it's not really having a good argument from what I said. So I came back and I say, are you saying that men today have to experience the pictures of men on social media, and because of that, it makes them anxious because of hypermasculinity? If you believe that men today are having to look up to hypermasculinity in a way that makes them anxious, I would have you look at the data from the 1980s, where every single male in the movies were extremely muscular, such as Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and others. And just about every single musical artist, they were all working out, they were all on steroids, or most of them. Everybody was tall, everybody had beautiful hair, everybody was known to be model good looking. So how could you say that there wasn't an emphasis on looking beautiful and having great hair, great muscles, great everything, great cars, lifestyles of the rich and famous? They were all showing off how rich they were. And you think men today have it harder? Prove it to me. So of course it comes back and it validates me. It says, yes, there were cultural icons in the 1980s, and they did celebrate a specific ideal of masculinity, blah, 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 but it doesn't answer the question. It just validates me in terms of media representation, changing standards. So in here it says, the changing standards of beauty and masculinity can shift over time. No kidding. There is a broader range of representations of masculinity, including more diverse body types and expressions of vulnerability. Right. And so they're using that as a way, again, that is leading to porn addiction or porn itself causing young men to have anxiety. But it just admitted that to be a man today, it's a lot more varied. You could be anything. You could even be super feminine. Like, it doesn't matter anymore. There's lots of roles that a man can play and still be considered to be masculine. So my question, and it's not so much a question, I'm trying to really push the point against AI here. I said, so if you're gonna make the point that standards of beauty and masculinity have shifted over time, and that today there's a broader range of representations of masculinity, including more diverse body types and expressions of vulnerability. And actually, a man can be feminine now, and it's okay. Then how can you say that there's more pressure to conform to a specific ideal of masculinity today? You're eating your own tail. What you're saying doesn't make sense, and you're ruining your own point. Because in the 1980s, it was generally considered to be only one form of masculinity, and that was to be a person who was tall, had great hair, who had a lot of money, and who was jacked up on steroids. So the type of man that you had to compare with in the 1980s was much more singular and much more difficult to attain than it is to today. Therefore, the anxiety that young men are feeling today is not from the media and not having to compare themselves to some ideal that's not reachable. It's because of their own inadequacies. Do you agree? And of course, it validates me. It says, you've raised a compelling argument regarding the pressures of masculinity across different eras. Okay, but it doesn't answer the question. I'm not saying across different eras. I'm saying if you're saying it's a problem today because men have to look up to a degree of masculinity, but they actually don't, especially compared to the 80s. And so it's not answering the question because it knows, well, it doesn't know anything. It doesn't know how to think, but it doesn't know how to put the data together. Let's see if I can get this point through here. It says, so you're making this is me. So you're making the argument that curated images and exposure seems to be much more in social media today and it's more accessible to people. Then how are you comparing that to when everybody in the 1980s had multiple TVs? And back then people did watch TV all the time, and they did watch it with a bunch of hyper masculine men, and many of whom, again, it's the same thing. Many of them who were trying to show off how much money they made. And women then also were considered to be their certain type of beauty. Again, with their hair and their clothes. It was much harder to fit in the 1980s than it is now. And then it just continues. It says you made a valid point again. And it just keeps going. And it says also that people become porn addicted, or they watch porn and they have anxiety and it causes them not to be socially active with people because they're watching a certain degree of porn and the algorithms take them to a certain type of porn, which makes no sense to me. And if it doesn't make sense to you, there's a reason, because it doesn't make sense, because in this area, AI, I don't think knows what it's talking about. So I say, if you're making the point that today individuals are not just passive consumers of content, that they're actively engaging with it and they curate their own profiles, what you're saying is that these things cause anxiety and these people are actively seeking out things that cause them anxiety in the first place. And of course it says, you make a good point, blah, blah, blah. And then I try to hit it with this, because it keeps saying that there's a societal pressure to conform. I'm like, well, everybody knows about conformity. Like, I don't know how, it probably goes back to the time of cavemen. But is it true today as much then? It's actually, there's less pressure to conform today. And here's some of the reasons I put as I asked the question. I said, but do you actually believe that there is a societal pressure to conform when everybody these days can have their own YouTube show or say whatever they want whenever they want on social media or TikTok and become famous and have a bunch of friends from all over the world who agree with any stupid, nonsensical opinion that they might have? They can say the newest and the latest and the stupidest thing to make people watch. So it's not about conforming. It's about being as crazy and as stupid as possible. And there's an anti-intellectualism out there that you don't have to be good at something anymore to actually be popular. So it has nothing to do with conforming. Again, it does its normal thing. You raise a valid point about the diversity of expression these days and the rise of platforms that allow individuals to showcase their unique personalities and creativity. What it doesn't say is it also allows individuals to showcase the fact that they don't know anything and they act like experts, and then there's other people who don't know anything who blindly follow them. So we have people like, I think it was around year 2000 when there was a writer's strike in Hollywood, and they decided to fix that by not paying the writers. So they had all these other reality shows where there were famous people got famous for doing nothing, and they didn't have to have any talent. And so that's where we are all over the world now. It used to be that people, again, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and actually way before that, you had people with a tremendous amount of talent who worked through their whole life to get where they got. Now, they could do anything, and they can somehow get famous. So it's not really about conforming. It means you can do anything you want, whenever you want. And according to this AI, it does talk about the attention economy, which is nice. But again, it's not answering my questions, and it's not able to debate me at this level. Then I try to hit it with this. I know this show's long, but I don't want to make this into 2 shows. So I say, if you're going to use the argument that porn is easily accessible now, and that's what causes porn addiction, are you willing to make the same argument about ice cream and candy and donuts? Because they're more available now than they were in the 80s also. So are you saying that the availability of donuts is what's causing people to overweight, not work out, and be unhealthy? And it says, you make a good point. And it doesn't say anything. It just says what I said about moderation and self-regulation, cultural influences, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't know how to debate me on that, because obviously it's wrong. And it's a really, let's just say it's a stupid argument. And so ChatGPT is giving you a list of things that it's pulling from data, but if the data is not good, what you're going to get is something that's not good. Let's see if I can finish this up with something. Then I asked too, if you believe that watching porn can bring out more anxiety to men because of expectations, are you trying to say that women don't have the same societal or even more societal expectations than men? And then, of course, it says you raise an important point about the pressures and expectations. Again, it's not going to answer the question. If this is harming men so much, why doesn't it harm women as much? And the answer is because no normal person going through normal human development would prefer to see a picture on a screen and think that that's a lot more enjoyable than having a loving, touching connection, reciprocal, mutually enjoyable with another human. And so they're becoming a little bit more inhuman, but it becomes not PC to say that about people, because there's more people like that than not. But that's the answer. It's because people are becoming less and less human every year by watching screens. Now, I'm going to, 34 minutes. Okay, let me say this real quick and then I'll be out of here. The World Health Organization has a recommendation on children between 0 to 5 years old of how much screen time they should have. And take a guess of how much that is. It's 0. And if you go up to 10 years old, the answer is still probably the same if they were being honest. It should be 0. So the cancer here of what's causing all these problems in these kids, which are not kids anymore, a lot of them are 15, 16. I see them at 30 years old, addicted to watching a screen because they are scared to death to have a relationship. It's this social media stuff. Anyway, hopefully this has been enjoyable for you in some way. And by the way, I was able to move the camera a little bit. Hopefully that was okay. Again, this is Kubi the Chow right here. And this is Nelson right here. Actually, I think I hear him trying to scratch by the door. That might be my cat though. Anyway, my name is Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.